Okay. Hi, everybody, and good evening. This is, good evening from Finland anyway. This is our 25th program of, I should say, program 25 of series 4. How long these series will go? IAB, identify as being, and today is the 3rd of December. Well, so much is going on, sometimes it feels when we take up this particular subject, it's like I have to get warmed up to the subject because, and maybe the same for you, there have been so many mundane issues before us which are of a crucial nature in the world of relativity. We just have to attend to them. I always we have in less than 2 weeks we have the final um, vote of the Electoral College, and at the present time we have a situation in which the blue is leading the Martian red by quite a bit, 36 electoral votes. At the same time, we have an incredible effort through lying and manipulation and invention. I mean, people are being paid off to say all kinds of things as if to reinforce the idea that the election has been stolen from the present occupant of the White House, whom I hesitate to call president, as so much has been abrogated. It's obvious that the narcissism is morbid narcissism. And was it yesterday? Over 3,000 deaths in the United States, which far outstrips any total in any other country. And there has been a relinquishment of care regarding so many of those avoidable deaths. And we're told that the situation is only going to get worse in this indoor season, this flu season, we might say. And yet, the attention is given only to fraudulent claims about a fraud that does not exist. And even the more responsible members of the Republican Party admit that it's time to move on and stop these meritless claims. So, this is in the background, in the foreground, it is the immediate thing. So many people dying unnecessarily. Basically, there is just a willingness to see people die so long as a very, very petty little lower ego can be satisfied in its psychopathology. I know these are strong words, but I come to no other conclusion than that. Now, we on the working on the inner side of life have to offer something of an esoteric nature that at least will add to the empowerment of the indigo ray. That ray, which is the um, soul ray of the United States, which is the soul ray of the planetary scheme, the Earth, and which is the soul ray of the solar logos of our solar system. The indigo at this time must prevail over that exoteric color of the sixth ray, the red, and not a very clean red at that. So we probably can't even represent what the true first ray red looks like. At least DK tells us those colors are so different. But we speak in terms of quality. Maybe, that's the best way not to name names, because basically two great qualities are fighting it out. One, uh, supportive of the angel of the presence, not only of the United States, but of humanity, and the other, supportive of the dweller on the threshold of the United States and of many nations who are flirting with fascism and even Nazism. And this flirtation, well, it's gone beyond that. I was appalled to realize that two individuals who have been criminals, really, who have been pardoned recently, have probably responded to the deal under which they were pardoned and are now calling for the application of martial law in the United States. Now, I don't think I knew it was bad, but I didn't know how bad it was. There's the temporary suspending of the Constitution. When we say the word temporary, who knows how long? And there is the opening of the door, well, the suspension of the electorate, and in the president, as the commander in chief, is focused all power, and the military rules. Now, I've spoken with some of my friends who are very up on these subjects, and they said, well, that's just a lot of noise. It's not going to happen. Okay. But now, these two criminals who have been pardoned simply through presidential preference and not because of merit to their case are calling for martial law. Now, that would be a way of completely overthrowing the will of the voters and also the steadfastness and universal applicability of the Constitution when it comes to the running of the government of the United States. That would be overthrown, and the word temporarily is added as a fig leaf. So it's obvious that this battle, fed, I think, and others around me think so, by the forces of evil and even cosmic evil, this battle continues. And there are many aspects to it, including the Georgia runoff, which we will increasingly reference, as it does determine whether a more soul inspired program, a more blue program, a more indigo program can be instated, and whether the selfishness can be disempowered. So our work goes on, and I mention it, just about every. Well, Tuya and I are mentioning it just in everything we do, and we are much supported by people who've been giving very good advice on these matters, and who see the need, and perhaps among us, I would say there are many who see the need. So we continue. So let's at least we have coming up at 8 o'clock p.m. GMT the vigil we've been doing. It's at 8 o'clock GMT during weekdays, and it is at 10 o'clock GMT on the weekends to give room for the many other programs that we are broadcasting, or webinaring or zooming. We have a number of different formats we're using at the present time. So with those kind of dangerous prognostications about possibilities which can be foreseen, we will sound great invocation number 2. Let the lords of liberation issue forth. Let them bring succor to the sons of men. Let the rider from the secret place come forth, and coming save. Come forth, O Mighty One. Let the souls of men awaken to the light, and may they stand with massed intent. Let the fiat of the Lord go forth. The end of woe has come. Come forth, O Mighty One. The hour of service of the saving force has now arrived. Let it be spread abroad, O Mighty One. Let light and love and power and death fulfill the purpose of the coming one. The will to save is here. The love to carry forth the work is widely spread abroad. The active aid of all who know the truth is also here. Come forth, O Mighty One, and blend these three. Construct a great defending wall. The rule of evil now must end. I guess I can't emphasize too much, whether you are American or whether from other countries, the importance for democracy of these next days and weeks. DK said in the United States there was a latent fascism, and fascism in a more extreme form is simply Nazism. And Nazism was the chosen method by which the Black Lodge, the Lodge of Materialism, chose to attempt to defeat humanity. So let's realize these things and simply continue to give our attention to them. And I do want to welcome you here. I know the subject is, it seems a little far out right now when one thinks of the immediate issues in the world of relativity. But I'm running my eyes over your names, and I, see so many of you that are here and faithfully here uh, for these programs, and I appreciate it. There is a sense in which I was just sort of stopped in my tracks today and realizing for a few brief moments a little deeper understanding of the mystery in which we live and move and have our being. And, it's just so ordinary. It seems like just whatever the senses report to us, this is it. But skimmed off the top of that, or maybe pervading every bit of it, is this in universe beingness, which is, words are having a difficult time to represent it. But once we do enter into it through the process of infuception, or whatever you want to call it, then more things become apparent than we would have imagined. And the universe in which we live changes to our consciousness in a very profound way. So what we've been trying to do, and it's not exactly a lecture, it's not exactly uh, a silent meditation. It's kind of a very slow lecture meditation that help us gather our thoughts and be impressed by certain revelations which are always there. Wherever there is no there, there's no here. Beyond these words, we have to begin to get the energy of what they mean. We're we're looking for, and of course our looking has to be in the universe, even though I have specified taking my cue from the great breadth of the stanzas of Jian, that we don't always have a universe. It just depends on how we define universe. But that's an important realization. Of course, we have to begin locally, or what seems to be locally. Eventually, we're going to discover in universe that everything is local. And that's if we admit the reality of here-ness. In other words, whatever's happening in the apparently most distant galaxy or quasar or, these astronomical centers of power, it's all happening apparently here. I mean, elsewhere, apparently, but in fact here. And then we discover that there's nothing else really than here. You think about that for a minute, because I mean, it's not a lasting statement, but everything is here. And everything is now, here and now. One of the important teachers of the last 50 years, Ramdas, who was Richard Alpert, I think his name, but he was a Harvard uh, psychologist, and he became quite the teacher, the guru for many, many people. And he wrote a book, Be Here Now. Now, that can mean so many different things, but I think you see the implications. He was speaking more in psychological terms, but you can speak in cosmological terms too when you say be here now. So from one point of view, whatever seems to be there is really more immediate, more intimate, more here. As a matter of fact, it's here is so intimate that it doesn't even really exist. It's part of the pairs of opposites. You can't really have a here without a there. But here seems to answer some deeper questions about being, or makes being more impressive than there, that which is remote. The apparently more close there-ness comes to here-ness, the more real it seems. But here-ness too is going to disappear because you always need a duality to create a here or there, and there is no duality. That's our Vedantic assumption. From the ancient Vedas descending into India, and India being the inheritor of much of the Atlantis wisdom, we come up with this hard to fathom concept of non duality, or indivisibleness, or inescapability. inescapableness, inescapability. And that's what we're looking for. We, victims of dualistic perception, because after all, there is apparently a perceiver and a perceived, and that is not by any means the final reality. We are victims of our own self limitation. And we have entered into dualistic perception. We're looking for this subtle thing, which is beyond the duality or beyond multiplicity, because duality immediately leads to multiplicity. And that's why the Pythagoreans considered the number two to be a kind of ill-omened number, because it opened the door to infinity, which was not capable of being solved at that time and maybe never. I think Pythagoras preferred a more orderly, limited cosmos. And duality led to that multiplicity which became an unorderable infinity. There's kind of a story told about Pythagoras taking a rest in the afternoon somewhere in some beautiful place in his compound, and he had a terrifying dream, and the dream was all about the existence of infinity rather than cosmos. So they didn't, as far as I know, speculate so much about the implications of infinity. Lately in mathematics, and even from Neoplatonic times, there has been a lot of speculation about infinity, and it's become more and more mathematically precise, which doesn't mean that it's really understandable. The person who advanced that whole study of infinity the most, and he's not the only one by any means, but it was the German Georg Cantor. He was actually a German Jew who was a Catholic. So he, and his whole purpose was to lay out some kind of understanding of infinitude so that God might be more completely understood. And Galileo, we know, had given up on that, deeming God incomprehensible. Well, that's probably true in an ultimate sense. No matter how big the consciousness in universe. So we're looking for some kind of inescapable self in universe. And the trouble is, it's just so obvious and so subtle that we don't notice it. We rarely notice it. Rarely does the revelation come concerning its nature. But if we want to know who we are, that recognition is indispensable. See, when we think about ourselves, we usually think in terms of our vehicles or maybe our more subtle vehicles, but they're all bounded. The aura is bounded, the causal body is bounded, and if we look at the triad convincingly, it has its boundaries, and the monad has a vehicle. The minute you talk about a vehicle, you're dealing with boundedness. But the very essence of the monad is unbounded, and that is the sometimes called the flying essence, or the volatile essence. Now, are we willing to recognize ourselves as that? Or do we insist on our bounded identity? Think about that for a moment. When I say think about it, I mean meditate on it. Are we willing to accept our essential unboundedness? That would be, of course, in a finally a super universal state. We'll talk about the boundary of the universe in a minute, any universe. So, are we so attached to boundaries that we cannot conceive of ourself except as bounded? I am this, you are that. That is that, this is this. And there are lines of demarcation. And that's just the way it is. That's the great illusion under which we are all living in the Mahamaya. We have to change, drastically change, our self conception. And this requires flexibility of the consciousness and flexibility in our imagination. Because it's through the imagination that we sometimes get that intuitive impression, which reveals a greater measure of truth, or we can call it, with Master Moria, we can call it straight knowledge. See, right now I'm using a lot of words. Those words are mediators between my consciousness and that of which it is conscious or could be conscious. The intuition is not active in all of us, and if it is active, rarely is it active with consistency. So we're trying to find this inescapable self, which is unbounded. Every time a boundary appears, you know that there's got to be more, not necessarily on the same level as the boundary. Remember, it all starts with the first fundamental of the secret doctrine in terms of our education on these matters. There is an unbounded, immutable principle. A first thing, we might say, a first and only thing, which never has had a boundary and never will. So there are some things maybe to be said here, and forgive my use of sort of third-rate formulations. You may have your own, and you would arrive at things in your own way. So basically, I'm trying to say here that we have this idea of extension. Um, so there is apparently uh, extension um, in time and space. I remember when I was studying philosophy at the university, and I ran into this concept of extension. And I realized that that's what our perceptual apparatus does. It is filled with perceptions which are apparently spread out in what we call space. So there are dimensions to it. Length, width, height. Those are the three fundamental dimensions, and then come all what we might call as vibratory dimensions. In other words, when you change subplanes or sub-subplanes, you're changing the ability of a point of tension to detect different phenomena. And each such phenomenon is what can we call it? It is a different dimension. In other words, frequency, I'm going to put down a principle here. In universe, change of frequency is change of dimension. When thinking of vibratory dimensions. And this is especially so when dealing with planes and subplanes. He said, really, a plane is a state of consciousness. DK is basically saying that. So, how many dimensions do we have? Well, we'd have to explore that. The number 10 is given, but those are the big ones. And there are subs and sub-subs, and I suppose there are ranges of dimensions, but if the point of tension is sufficiently changed, dimension changes. If the point of tension is sufficiently uh, raised or lowered, the dimension involved changes. Now, maybe some of these concepts I know, okay, but we'll just have to work with them. We're looking for the ultimate is dimensionlessness. Absoluteness is dimensionlessness. May seem a strange statement, but in order to have dimension, and really the only difference between us and a master and a master and a logos and a logos and a soul, those differences, they are dimensional differences based on division. Now, in that, thou art that, in that which is never essentially subdivided, there just are no differentiable dimensions. And an utter, unchangeable, forever, even forever doesn't exist, sameness persists. Well, we're going to be, in one way, getting rid of space and we're going to say there is not only no there, but no here, because without an observer, there can't be a here and there. And the absoluteness has no observer. And without an observer, there can be no past, present, and future. There's only now. And then we'd have to profoundly go into what now might be. But what we're looking for in our rather divided state, we are looking for the isness, which is I-ness. I sometimes write it this way. We're looking for the isness, which is I-ness. Now just think about that for a minute. And what that means, if anything is in universe, it is you. And if anything is supra universally existent, it is you. And that's what DK means with that wonderful second ray mantra, naught is but me. So isness is I-ness, is be-ness, or sometimes it's called thatness, or ultimately it is absoluteness. So really, in universe, the self, universal self, is inescapable. It's just the presence, and you're never going to escape it. Universal is inescapable. And supra universally, the greater self is inescapable. So this is all about the us, or the we that is I. All this is about the we that is I, or, or, oh, that's one way to do it. Now, it seems a long way from our present problems. And in a way, it's infinitely far from our present problems. People are dying. They are making a forced transition because of what appears to us to be a dreadful pandemic. I sometimes wonder, let light and love and power and death fulfill the purpose of the coming one. Well, the coming one is the Christ. And what will it take to bring Christ consciousness, the mind as it is in Christ, into the perceptual apparatus of more and more people who are totally ignoring soul possibilities, triadal possibilities, monadic possibilities, higher possibilities? What will it take? Notice how people change when they've had this disease. Many do, that is. There are some tough nuts that just refuse to change. But even they, the old saying, if I can think of the old saying, the mills, the mill of the gods grinds slow, but exceeding fine. meaning at length egotism is pulverized into homogeneity or sameness or beingness. No grain will come out of that divine mill without having been denied its separativeness. So this question of being bound or not bound, when we think about infinity, we oftentimes think of something that is apparently unbounded, extensibility in time and space. Like we say, oh, it goes on forever. It, the extension in space, goes on forever, the extension in time. That's how we ordinarily think. But I'm coming to the conclusion, and maybe it makes sense to you too, that reality is non-extensible. And what that means, I mean, that's a heck of a statement, you know. Reality is non-extensible. No discernible form, no articulation, no differentiation, no articulation, no differentiation exists. Within it. Matter of fact, there's no within and without. All of our prepositions, all of our mathematics just goes out the window when we're dealing with reality. It doesn't have space. It doesn't have time. Unless there is relativity, you can't say that something, you know, you might say it is the eternal duration. But against what are you measuring that? Something else which doesn't exist. So, you know, is this nihilism? Well, it certainly eliminates normal thinghood, but it doesn't eliminate the reality which has become those things. And basically, more and more, just to put it simply, we identify as everything we perceive. So, to put, excuse me, to put it simply, we in universe identify with everything we perceive. I was walking with one of my sons, and he's a philosophically inclined person, and we were talking about this subject. And, you know, this is kind of a preposterous thought, even to philosophers. I guess they call it solipsism. And he said, well, Dad, you mean even the asphalt? Because we were walking near a tarry road where new asphalt had been put in. And in other words, does one identify even with or as the asphalt? And I just had to say, yeah, even the asphalt. Anything. DK said it, hasn't he? Naught is but me. Naught is perceived but that which is self-perceived. In other words, you can't get rid of yourself. You can't get rid of the self. There's just no profit in suicide, you know? You just can't blank it all out. You can't do it. So how do we, after all, live in this apparent spatial extension and apparent temporal extension? Because time and space, well, we live in this in the Mahamayavic world. We do live in time and space in the Mahamayavic world, i.e., that is, any universe. So, as Shankara said, the great sage, most mysterious is Maya and forever. He didn't say cyclically forever, but I think, if he was going into it more deeply or more precise, he would say, along with the great breath, cyclically forever. Most mysterious is Maya, and cyclically forever. So, we live in this, and most people think of nothing else but Maya in the larger sense. I don't mean Maya as DK is defining it. He defines it as that unthinking emotional mess. That's not exactly what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the great illusion which appears as a universe. So we've been always in Maya cyclically. And yet, paradoxically, even the great breath has to be a very high type of illusion because it's the archetype of time. And time is an illusion because it demands separation, it demands division. And division is the one thing that is not allowed in absoluteness, even though myopically it arises from absoluteness without changing absoluteness at all. And that's the biggest of all paradoxes. So if we're living in this Maya, we could call it illusion, we could call it glamour, but always in the big sense. If we're living in this Maya, how do we grapple with reality? Or are we just sucked into the Maya and that's all we recognize? And One of the things I've said here is we just have to learn to drop the customary perceptual categories. I think Immanuel Kant called time and space as categories of the mind, categories. They're not reality itself, they're categories. When we see division, we have to have a more overpowering sense of non-division. So I'll write that down. When in universe, that's all we can really talk about, I'm afraid. When in universe we perceive, division, we must have a still more overpowering sense of non-division. When the universe or any universe is quote unquote over, then we'll worry about other other issues. But right now, we are living in our own self-perception. So you cannot avoid perceiving division, and you must handle it. And that's what we call working with relativity. You're in the relative world. But then there's no running away from relativity. At least there should not be. I mean, people seek some kind of unity through all kinds of things, that destroy their vehicle. The drugs, the alcohol, the excessive indulgence of all kinds. I mean, they seek to refine the unity which something in them knows exists. But a master is not one who runs away from relativity, acknowledges the impression of relativity, but at the same time has a still more overpowering sense of the one, of the one. Now, next time, I've got to promise myself that we'll get into this interesting question of the boundary of any universe being the cessation of self-perception. We draw a line regarding our own self-perception, and beyond that, except if we were to dissolve the whole thing, there is nothing. It's a self-perceptual boundary. That's the boundary of the universe, and I must promise myself and you that we'll get into it. But I keep on have a little trouble, I have a little trouble here because I keep on wading in to other subjects. But here on ahead, we can talk about what matter is. And matter basically being a self-perception. And all the varieties of matter being an emanatively reduced being emanatively reduced self-perceptions. So I want to say that if I can do this, um, all the varieties of matter are emanatively reduced self perceptions. I want to get into that. Now, admittedly, it's a long way from all of our immediate Mahamayavic relativistic problems that we have to deal with as we, being emanatively reduced self-perceptions. And we have to deal with other factors in the world of relativity. And we will definitely deal with them. I have, one day all of this will become a book or something. It's already on its way, but it needs the assistance of some wonderful seventh ray individuals who uh, can help with the orderly presentation of things. And I'm just going to make a marker here. Right here. So this would be the end of program 25, I guess. Series 4, it's evening. And we'll have the beginning of program 26 in series 4. And it'll be, unless there's a full moon or something, new moon coming up to interfere with it, we will have it. And it'll be a morning presentation. I have to be careful, otherwise Michael Stacy's going to catch me not being careful. And I'll have all these corrections to make. So, in finish, and there we go. This is a different kind of study, friends, which obviously we don't have that much more to go in this little section. But of course, I keep adding to it and I keep on filling things in. So, yes, there's always more. Is there always more? Well, apparently, when dealing with our image, self-image, as the transcendental supra-universal God. That's what we are, and there's always more to us, and more and more and more and more, and yet that is still an illusion. Because you can't say more of the same, it's contradictory. And all you've got is the same. So, when you say more of the same, it implies a division, which doesn't really exist. Now, to be practical about it, I would just say the practical thing that we need to do if we're going to do something, To do something practical about all this is to be practical, look at the many and see only the one. Now that is a practical recommendation, and that's what we can practice. We can practice that. Look at the many and see only the one. We can, if you want to simplify the whole thing, that's what we can do. Okay. Now, we can't go on too long because we do have the vigil, and it'll be on Zoom. And I somewhere here I have, or I had a picture. Maybe this is it. Okay, so right here. Um, Wait a second. Oh yeah, right there it is. Okay, so this is where we're going to go, to this particular link, and I can copy that link.
You've already put it in the chat box.
Have I? Oh my
Yes.
goodness. Well, it's nice to be ahead of myself, if there were such a thing as being ahead or behind anything. All right, great. Nice to know. Okay, Michael, let's see if there's anybody that would like to say or offer um, any thought on what we've dealt with today. What I would do, as we go through this quasi lecture meditation, I would just take notes of something or anything that interested me. So, because I know it's a lot to, you can't just hold it in your mind. You make a note, and then there's the hope that maybe, okay, um, maybe we'll remember something. So is there anything?
Well, I am looking for any hands raised or comments or questions put into the chat box. And nothing yet in this relative time.
Are you sure there's nothing? Or by having identified nothing, have you made it a something?
Well, that's always the question.
I basically, to register anything is to thing it, to something it. Even to register an absence is to thing the absence. I admit it, friends. It's a different language, but okay. Maybe once a week we can submit ourselves to it without going crazy. That's the hope. And then get back to relativity where the job has to be done at the moment. Let's see, what do we have here?
And then I ponder from that boundless, immutable principle issuing forth love, which
Yes,
is to
and
me the
every
great law of the universe.
well, yes, and what is the algorithm of our particular universe? Probably they're always a little different in some manner, because there is the Master Moria talks about it. I'm just going to put this down. He talks about, I'm just going to say something like notes, okay? And he talks about the great principle of unrepeatability. So, we're not really getting the same universe ever. It's only same in essence, but it's not in terms of the divine aspects it will put forth. It's not the same. And, in our universe, it may be love, and maybe it's something else. DK sometimes, he looks at the normal things like will, love, and intelligence, and he says, and he doesn't name them, the other, a number of other aspects that we're not really ready to discuss yet. So we're a long way from knowing what the nature of this particular universe really is. It's got to be something, well, it's got to be something. But let's just keep it for the moment. If we keep it within our solar system, and if we keep it upon our planet, it is love. And in our solar system, it is love. But really, when it comes to the 7 solar systems, of which ours is one, and in which our solar system is a great heart center, we don't know the main theme of that greater system. Could be, it could be on any one of the 7 divisions, or it could be love, we don't know. He hasn't really told us, but I do think that it has something to do either with the sacral center or the solar plexus center, and that might give a hint as to what the principle might be, even though our own solar logos is a god of love. And when it comes to the whole thing, well, there's just no way.
Isabel has the answer.
Oh, hey.
The heart knows instantly. The mind needs time to know.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the Buddhi principle. It's the love wisdom principle on the Buddhic plane that comes in forcibly when the 4th subplane is activated. It's called the 6th principle, Buddhi, love wisdom, and it is immediate knowledge, which I think is what you're driving at. It is straight knowledge, as Moria says. It's like the lightning, and it knows. And that's because of where we are in our conceptualization. We can conceive of planetary logoi. We can conceive of solar logoi. When we start to think about constellational logoi, such as the Lord of the 7 solar systems or whatever, or beyond, we have the theory. But unlike the masters, we have none of the specifics. Actually, there's a place in Cosmic Fire, right around page 1084, some 1082, 83, 84, 85, right in there, where he basically tells us that the masters know the quality of certain neighboring galaxies. Of course, we don't know any of that. but they have some kind of language which reveals the essential quality. For us, on our planet, in our solar system, it is the immediate perception that love reveals. It's love wisdom. Now, how far can we take that? Well, maybe we don't need to take it too far. Maybe just developing that would be our next frontier in the sixth root race, a Buddhic root race to last 10 million years approximately. So love is all important, and it is immediate, and it is straight, and it is trans-rational in one sense, and is utter rationality in another sense, and it's a frontier for us. It's a presented attribute of the Christ, which is just now beginning to be somewhat absorbed, just the way wisdom was the presented attribute of the Buddha. And synthesis of St. Paul, interestingly enough. Okay, thanks for that thought. What else? Anything?
Not yet.
Okay. Well, as I say, there are, there are the many and the one. Just to keep it really simple. And we live perceptually in the many for the most part. And it's so utterly frequent. It's just how our life is. The many of Maya, the many of Maya. Okay? So we live in the many of Maya. But can we live in the one from which Maya arises? That's going to be the question for us. Now, if I were to go, you already begin to see this in Gemini, and I'll go there in Esoteric Astrology, page 332, and there it is, and you see the progression in Gemini. I serve myself. Well, that's the egocentric point of view, and it has to do with utter manyness, but a profound self-interest in the midst of that manyness. And then when we become more advanced, altruism enters in. I serve my brother. And, Gemini is going to move towards divine love and understanding, which we find in Libra, don't we? Look here. Divine love, understanding. Gemini moves towards Libra. And finally, I serve the one. So from the self to the smallest group of two and beyond, and finally to the one. That is the progression of different stages of the use of the Gemini energy. We have this in Leo too, don't we? The lower self, that's the I serve myself position of Gemini, isn't it? And let's see if I can if I can do that. Okay, so this is the highlighter. The lower self is first. And then I serve my brother. In Leo, the higher self comes next because the soul is group conscious and brotherhood is natural to anyone who is in the soul. And finally, again, the one self, which is the same as I serve the one. And that little point that out of which the lower ego grew, that point of difference is relinquished. And when the point is relinquished, where are you? You're not here or there, you're everywhere. And probably we could find something similar in relation to different signs, or we could interpret them accordingly. But moving toward the one from the many, if I had to say, what is the keynote of everything we are doing here? Now, this is assuming we already have entered the many in a positive way through altruism. We recognize the group somehow. Maybe we have entered that. But to move beyond that to the one, from the many to the one, from the many to the one, it's such a step and it's so subtle and it's so removed from everything we normally care about, and yet it's so immediate from the many to the one. That's what we're doing here, or, attempting to register. Okay. Well, there maybe silence reigned, which is okay as well, because in silence is the synthesis. We've been emphasizing quite a bit Sagittarius, and more than I do. Tuya has emphasized the silent quality of Sagittarius. Well, I suppose when the great cymbals that Hercules crashes together drive all the racket to silence in the one great synthetic word, we begin to perceive in that silence a reality which is no longer obstructed by the many thought forms, those birds with iron talons and iron beaks that stop us from realizing reality. Um, when the cymbal crashes, we are driven into silence. And in that silence, the birds scatter, and the vision of reality comes home to us in this Advent period on our way toward the solstice, when we always, begin according to DK's instructions, the new year in the Moria Federation, and thus it will be with the real esoteric schools that are coming. That's the time, that Capricorn solstice. So there'll be a lot of programming coming up now in this month, this December, and we'll certainly let you know about it. Okay, let's then get ready for the vigil, those of you who may want to attend it. And we're going to end with the great invocation. All I have to do is find it. Let's see if I can find it. And Michael, let me know if for any reason I don't get it. Do you see it?
Yes, it's on the screen now.
Okay, good. So let's end this exploration, which transforms the many into the one, ideally, with the great invocation. From the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into the minds of men. Let light descend on earth. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into the hearts of men. May Christ return to earth. From the center where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wills of men, the purpose which the masters know and serve. From the center which we call the race of men, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth. Om. Om. Okay, everybody, tomorrow morning, glamour, dissipation of, we've got plenty of it around, so we won't be wanting for a target in these post-Sagittarian days. And then in the evening, we will have the treatise on cosmic fire in depth. And again at 8 o'clock GMT, we will have the USA Vigil. That's as far as I know or can go at the moment. So, thank you for being here, and many blessings, lots of love from all of us on the communications group or in the communications group. And we'll see you all soon, or at least some of you, I suppose. Okay. Bye bye for now.